Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, yesterday I mistakenly said that verse 32 is the beginning of the nutshell verses. It was another prelude to it. But there were several questions. So one was, what did Brahma meditate on? Right? That was asked by Prabhuji. It's a good question, because if he heard the syllabus tapa, and then he meditated. You know how long he meditated? Do you know how long he meditated? What? How many? 311 trillion years and 40 billion, 311 trillion, 40 billion years. I know. He meditated that long. It's in the, okay, it's in this, I can tell you where it's at. 1 second. Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd canto, 8th chapter, 21st and 22nd verse. Okay. 3, 8, 21 and 22. Now the question is, what did he meditate on? Well, it says there that he meditated on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, how can you understand this? It's because he had a previous life, and he was able to remember. When he heard tapa, he knew what it meant. It meant he has to perform tapasya. And why? Why does he have to purify himself? Because he's going to have the top position in the material universe. And that requires, severe tapasya. Now, Lord Chaitanya has made tapasya rather easy in Kali Yuga. Our tapasya is chanting Hare Krishna, of course, not the la 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 la, but Hare Krishna, dancing ecstatically for the pleasure of the Lord, not dancing for, showing off to others, but dancing very nicely, the Prabhupada two-step, right? And taking prasadam, but only prasadam, and regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees, and going out on Sankirtan and preaching, not just going out there to sing and dance, but also preaching and distributing Prabhupada's books. That is and then taking rest early and waking up early and coming to Mangalarti. That is our austerity, or tapasya. Whereas Brahma's tapasya was to meditate on Krishna for 311 trillion and 40 billion years. So it's not easy to become Lord Brahma. Don't think it's an easy thing to do. Okay, so that's answering that question. He meditated on Krishna's form. So did you look it up, the verse 3, 8, 21 and 22? Go ahead, what's it say? All right, so now you have to multiply, right? So 1 day, right, is how many years?
400, 4.3 million.
Right. Now you have to multiply that by 2 because there's the nighttime also. All right, so now you have 1 full day. Then you have to multiply by 30 because there's 30 days in a month. Right?
That's how it becomes 300.
No, wait a minute. It's not over yet. And then, so that makes what? That's 1 month, right? How many months are there? 12 months in a year. You have to multiply it by 12. And how many years? There's 100 years. So you do all that multiplication, you get 311 trillion, 40 billion years. That's the duration of his meditation. And he meditated the whole time on Krishna. Okay?
And then Brahma is performing the
Yeah.
creation another minute.
Well, no. Then he's hears Krishna's flute, and he becomes enlightened with knowledge. He actually, and Krishna speaks to him and shows him not everything, but some parts of Vaikuntha. And now he's ready, and then Krishna instructs him how he can make the bodies. He doesn't create the souls. The soul is created by the Lord, but he creates the different bodies, 8,400,000 species. How does he do all that? He has sons, and they're Prajapatis. He's the supreme Prajapati, and they're also Prajapatis. Like, for example, Kashyapa Muni. He's not only the father of Diti and Aditi, he also has a wife that gives birth to snakes and other types of living entities. This is all explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. So he creates 8,400,000 with the help of his sons who are also Prajapatis. Okay, so that was one question. There was another, let's see, there was something else. What was that? All right, anyway, we'll begin now. The text 33, which is the first of the Catuh Slokas. And by the way, it's very important to understand the simple explanation of this first Catuh Sloka is, what are the forms of the Lord both in matter and in transcendence? That's what we're going to study today. What are the forms of the Lord in matter and in spirituality, or matter and transcendence? So he has forms in the spiritual world, he has forms in the material world. Okay, so Prabhupada begins, so the verse says, Yavan aham yata bhavo. Aham evasam evagre nanyad yat sat param paschad aham yad etachcha yo vasisyeta sosmyaham. And he says, Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself, nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead, and after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. Okay. Now, what does this mean exactly? Basically, it means this, that Krishna is the primary quality of everything. Now, look up in the dictionary, primary qualities and secondary qualities. And while you're looking that up, I forgot one thing. I have to bring it from my room. I'll be right back. Look it up and read what it says. Primary, secondary.
Any of the qualities inherent in an object, namely quantity, extent, figure, solidity,
Now you're going to understand why the dictionary definitions are misleading to many words. So, but you can't understand that unless you read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. You'll never come to that conclusion. And that's why everything is planned in the material education to divert your attention from God. Everything. So what does it say? Primary qualities.
any of the qualities inherent in an object,
Inherent, right?
inherent in an object, namely quantity, extent, figure, solidity, and motion or rest.
Okay. And what are the secondary qualities? Color, taste, smell,
Yeah, which are merely the effects of such real properties on the mind.
such real property. Okay, now, when we begin to understand with this first mantra of the Catuh Sloka, it says, basically it's saying, and Krishna speaking to Brahma, he's instructing him, right? He's instructing him. And he says, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself, nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now, Krishna is the cause of the creation. He's existing before it, and he's now. And then he says, that which you see now is also I. What the creation itself? It's also I. The personality of Godhead, and after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. So that means that he is the primary quality of everything in the spiritual world and the material world. Not this phony explanation they're giving in the dictionary. He is the primary quality. He is the cause and the effect of everything. He's not just the cause, he's also the effect. How is that? Well, you could say, well, yeah, he's everywhere present in the spiritual world, but how can he be everything in the material world? Because he expands himself as Paramatma into every atom of all the universes in the material world. There are millions of universes, not just our universe. There's millions and millions of other universes, maybe billions of them. And all of them put together don't represent hardly 1/4 of the of Krishna's realm. You see, we're running into impossible to understand statistics here. He meditates 311 billion. That's almost 100 times more than the deficit of the United States. No, what do I mean? That's 300 times more than the deficit, or 3,000 times more than the deficit of the United States. You know, the deficit of the United States is only $30 trillion, right? His lifespan is 311 trillion, 40 billion years. And that's the time he meditated. Now, the creation is going to start. He's going to have that same period of time, right? And then there are innumerable planets, Vaikuntha planets, in the spiritual world. Innumerable. And Krishna expands himself into an innumerable number of Narayanas. And then he expands himself with innumerable universes in the material world and innumerable Vishnu incarnations. See, we're running into astronomical numbers here. He's not an ordinary person. You know, someone says, you know, oh, well, in other words, so-and-so is God. What? They don't understand what God is. You take some ordinary person and you say he's God, that's because they're ignorant. They don't understand who God is. We're just beginning to understand the science of God. It's going to be explained in these 4 verses. We're just beginning to understand. The science of God is the most essential knowledge if you want to go back to Godhead. You cannot go back to Godhead unless you understand the science of Krishna. Okay, so what does it mean that he's the primary quality of everything? If you see something, like let's say this microphone, well, you can measure it. It's this long, it's this wide, and it has this, hardness to it. Those are materialistic qualities of the microphone. But what you don't see is that Krishna is present in every atom in this microphone. So you're not seeing the full reality of this microphone, or we're not seeing the full reality of it, right? And and those things are actually moving. All those atoms are actually moving also, but you don't see it. So that's why people are in illusion in the material world. So this was Prahlad Maharaj, this was all the pure devotees. They understand that nothing exists outside of Krishna. Krishna is in everything, and he encompasses everything. He's the beginning of everything, and when everything disappears, he's still existing. He's the primary quality of everything. When you begin to understand that, then you start to become Krishna conscious. Most devotees, like many times things happen to devotees, they get bewildered. You know, their parent dies, or they lose their job, or they get a divorce, or something happens, they get bewildered, right? But once you understand Krishna is the primary quality of everything, and he's present everywhere, and especially in your heart and in the heart of every living entity, everything changes. You don't get disturbed. You don't get scared. You don't get an anxiety, because nothing can happen without Krishna's sanction. He's the supreme controller of everything. You see? And no one is equal to him or greater than him. And as he says in Bhagavad Gita, Shinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantaksto Vibhadrani Vidunoti Srihitsatam So, if you hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or if you hear about him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, this is considered very pious activity or righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as his best friend or best wishing friend, and purifies the devotee who continues to constantly hear about him. If you understand this one verse, this is 1st Canto, 2nd chapter, verse number 17. If you understand this one verse, now you have the solution to all problems of life. Let me read it again. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend. In other words, he becomes super interested in you because you have developed a super interest in knowing about him. Let's say we have Prabhuji here, right? Radhapati Prabhu. And Radhapati hears that there's some guy and he's always saying nice things about him. And someone tells you, I met this person, and I don't know how he knows you, but he was saying the nicest things. I couldn't believe what he was saying. I didn't even know these things about you. Well, what would you think, Prabhu? What would you think?
Maharaj, I missed that. Could you read it?
But you were sitting right there. And you were looking at me while I was saying it. Okay, I said, if someone came up to you and said, Prabhuji, I met someone today, and they know you, and they were speaking the nicest things, and things I never heard about you before. I didn't know you were such a wonderful person. What would you think?
That person is appreciating other. That means.
Would you like to meet that person?
Yeah, because he has a positive attitude.
Very,
It's
not
nice.
only positive. He's saying things about you, and it's like, it's the most wonderful thing,
Yeah.
right? He must be a good person. So you see, if you take an interest in hearing about Krishna, he takes an interest in you. And he becomes your best wishing friend because you constantly engaged in hearing about him. This is a very important verse, right? So now we're going to see that in this first verse of the Chaturvyuha, we're going to see how mean, nasty, and horrible are the Mayavadis. They try and reduce Krishna. The Mayavadis, as I said yesterday, they're worse than the atheists. The Mayavadis are also atheists, but they're worse than the atheists. They insult Krishna worse than the atheists do. And the atheists really insult Krishna. They insult him worse than the atheists. You're going to find out how severe it is. Right? But you can only find out when you realize how great Krishna is and how these people are smearing him, just throwing mud at him all the time, every day. Okay, so now Krishna says, Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself. Now, he's talking about the material creation, but there's a spiritual creation that does not appear and disappear. So he's always present, and he's always visible in the spiritual world. But in the material world, when the material world disappears, right? He's still existing, but there's no material world to see, right? So he's existing before the material world is created. He's existing when the material world is created. He's present in every atom of the universe and in the heart of every living entity. And because of that, everything works automatically. It looks like it's all happening automatically. Like, if tomorrow the sun doesn't come up, well, how would you feel about that? You know, that would be a disaster, right? And if tomorrow the Earth falls out of its orbit, that would be a disaster. But none of that stuff is happening. Every day they're predicting exactly when the sun is going to come up and when the sun is going to go down. And every day they can tell you approximately what the weather is going to be. Every day they can tell you all kinds of things, because all this regularity and all this organization is going on perfectly in the universe, right? So, therefore, who is controlling it? Because let's say you have a bus, not a ticket, but a bus transit, let's say, paper, and it says, you know, the bus is going to arrive at such and such an hour, right? So every day it's arriving at such and such an hour. If it doesn't arrive at such and such an hour, you complain. You say, hey, one of you guys is nonsense. And they say, well, you have to excuse us. We were understaffed today, blah, blah, blah. So whenever something is happening in a regular way, it's being controlled by somebody. So who's controlling the movement of all these planets? Who's controlling your digestion? Who's controlling your breathing when you go to sleep at night? Who's controlling how a baby is formed in the womb of a mother? The mother doesn't know. Any ladies, you remember how you formed a baby in your womb? You don't know. It's a mystery. There are a lot of mysterious things happening that people don't understand. The scientists don't understand it. They're making all these fake theories up. So here it's saying that Krishna, this is the number one thing we have to take away tonight from hearing about this verse. Krishna is the primary quality of everything. Nothing is independent of Krishna. Krishna not only expands everything, everything is within him. He's also within everything. He exists before the material creation, while the creation is manifest, and after the material creation is wound up, he's still there, because he's the primary quality of everything. Once you understand that, then you're no longer fearful. You're no longer in anxiety. You no longer have any doubts, because nothing can happen without Krishna's sanction. Not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of Krishna. He's controlling everything. And yet, we go many hours of the day forgetting about him. And he's saying here, listen, if you hear about me and you're very enthusiastic to hear about me, I get enthusiastic about you. He's saying that. Okay, so to begin the purport, Prabhupada says, we should note very carefully that the personality of Godhead is addressing Lord Brahma. That doesn't mean he's putting a dress on him. It means he's speaking to Lord Brahma, right? And specifying with great emphasis himself. In other words, he's explaining himself to Brahma. Because how is Brahma going to have faith and going to have determination to be the secondary creator of the world unless he really understands who Krishna is, who's the primary creator? Right? So, and Krishna is pointing out that it is he, the personality of Godhead, who existed before the creation, and it is he only who maintains the creation, and it is he only who remains after the annihilation of the creation. Brahma is also a creation of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist puts forth the theory of oneness in the sense that Brahma, also being the same principle of I, because he is an emanation from the I, or the absolute truth, Krishna, is identical with the Lord. The principle of I, and that there is thus nothing more than the principle of I, as explained in this verse. So, nobody really understands what I just read. Anybody understand what I just read? But it's right there. Right? I didn't miss any word. What it's saying is, the Mayavadis give a false interpretation of the I. And they do it in such a clever way that you got confused. Right? You didn't know what he's talking about. Right? Although you understand all the words, but so many I's, you don't understand what he's talking about. What Prabhupada did, what he says, look, Krishna is it. He is the Supreme Personality of God. He's everywhere before creation, material creation, while the material world exists, and after it's ended, he's still there. He is the primary quality of everything. And he's also in the spiritual world. The spiritual world didn't stop because the material world stopped. That's going on. And he's there. He has no influence. He's not influenced by whatever happens in the material world. But you should understand that when you're talking about the material world, he's there before the creation, he's there during the creation, and he's there after the creation. Right? But the Mayavadis, they are trying to divert your attention. Now, what is Krishna talking to Brahma about? He's trying to explain to him that he is the number one thing, the number one personality, right? So Prabhupada says, we should note very carefully that the personality of Godhead is addressing Lord Brahma. In other words, he's talking to him and specifying with great emphasis himself. In other words, he's saying, look, pay attention, Brahma. I am it. I am everything. Do you understand? Pointing out that it is he, the personality of Godhead. There's no other supreme personality of Godhead or supreme absolute truth. He is the absolute truth and the supreme personality of Godhead. No one comes close to him. Who existed before the creation. It is he only who maintains the creation, and it is he only who remains after the annihilation of the creation. Now, the spiritual world is not created. It's eternal, right? That's still there. That's going on. Now, he's just talking about the material world because we're all confused by the material world. The spiritual world is easier to understand than the material world because the material world appears and disappears, and we get confused. Just like sometimes you got money in the bank, and other times you don't have any money in the bank. You get confused, right? So in the same way, the material world is more difficult to understand than the spiritual world because it disappears at one point. Everything that you built up and your body, everything, it all disappears, right? You get confused, right? So Krishna is saying, look, that it is he only who remains after the annihilation of the creation. Brahma is also a creation of the Supreme Lord. Okay? Now, up until that, you understand. Then he brings in the impersonalist. He says the impersonalist puts forth the theory. It's a theory. What is a theory? A theory is you do some experimentation and you see that there's a pattern, some kind of a pattern. Based on that pattern, you make a theory, and then you see how good the theory is by seeing how much you can predict from that theory. Now, if you predict 10%, it's a very weak theory. If your theory gives you predictions up to 1% to 10% is very weak. if it gives you 50% predictions, then it's above 50%, it becomes a scientific theory. It's still a theory. It's not 100% prediction. If it gives you 100% prediction, it's fact. But hardly any theory. They thought that Newton's theory of the motion of, macroscopic things under the influence of gravity was fact. But then they found out, no, it doesn't explain microscopic particles going at the speed of light. So they had to give another theory for that, right? But for like 400 years, everyone believed Newton's theory was 100% fact. And it predicts very well macroscopic bodies moving under the force of gravity. Okay, but it's still a theory. It's not fact, because there are some situations which it doesn't work.
The principle of I, is that something similar to the invocation mantra of Ishopanishad?
We'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. So then it continues. Now he's going to talk about how the Mayavadis skew everything, confuse everything, right, about this I. So it says, Brahma is also a creation of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist puts forth the theory of oneness. Now, this is a false theory. That's why he says, in the sense that Brahma, also being the same principle of I, because he is an emanation from the I. Who's that I? That's Krishna, right? The absolute truth is identical with the Lord. So they're equating now Brahma is equal to Krishna, where Krishna already said there's no one equal to me. You see how clever the Mayavadis are. And then it says, Brahma also being the same principle of I, because he is an emanation from the I, the absolute truth, is identical with the Lord, the principle of I, and that there is thus nothing more than the principle of I as explained in this verse. So they're giving their interpretation of the verse, which is completely wrong. But they do it in such a clever way that they confuse you, and you say, well, they must know what they're talking about, because I didn't understand a damn word that they said. And they're very clever. Very, very clever. Okay, so then, accepting the argument, now Prabhupada said, accepting the argument of the Mayavadis. Whoa. Why does he say that? He's saying, accepting the argument of the impersonalists, it is to be admitted that the Lord is the creator I, and that Brahma is the created I. But that's the whole point. Where did Brahma come from? He didn't come out by himself, right? He's created by Krishna. He's the son of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. And Garbhodakshay Vishnu created him without the help of Lakshmi. Right? Because Garbhodakshay Vishnu is a plenary expansion of Krishna. He has that power. Right? So there's a huge number of expansions of Krishna leading up to Garbhodakshay Vishnu, who becomes the father of Brahma. So it's not that there was nothing. There was no Krishna, no Balaram, no first Chaturvyuha, no Narayana, no second Chaturvyuha, no Vishnu incarnations, and Brahma sort of appeared by himself. No. There's all that in the background, and Garbhodakshay Vishnu, mentally, creates Brahma. Right? So Brahma, you cannot say that Brahma is equal to Krishna. That's what the Mayavadis are trying to say. And not only do they say they're equal to Krishna, that there is only They don't talk about Krishna. They talk about Brahman. So that's why he said here, he is an emanation from I, the absolute truth. They didn't mention Krishna's name there. They're saying the absolute truth. And for them, the absolute truth is Brahman. It's not Krishna. Right? So now it says, therefore, there is a difference between the two I's. That's not E-Y-E. It's I, right? Capital I, right? The two I's. He's talking about Brahma and Krishna, right? Namely, it's because he's saying, let's assume the Mayavadis are right, right? They're not right, but he said, let's assume they're right. Still, there's a difference between Krishna and Brahma. That's what's going to come out of this. And he says that Brahma is created. Therefore, there's a difference between the two I's, namely the predominator I and the predominated I. Because why? Brahma is born and he's confused because there's no material creation yet. He's sitting on the whirl, the flower of the lotus, and there's a big stem, and he doesn't know who he is, what his purpose in life. So he goes into the stem where the whole universe will be there when it's created. It's not created yet. It's all dark. He goes up and down. He doesn't see anything. He gets more confused. He comes back, and then he hears ta ba. Then he understands, oh, I know what that means, because he had a previous life. And it means that you have to begin penance and austerity, tapasya, severe austerity. And he does that austerity for 311 trillion, 40 billion years. We can't even count that. You don't even know how many zeros that is, right? And afterwards, he hears the flute of Krishna, and that enlightens him. And then eventually Krishna speaks to him and shows him some aspects of Vaikuntha, the spiritual world. And then he gets the knowledge of how to make all the different species, the bodies. And like I said, he doesn't create the souls. The souls are coming from Krishna. Don't think that he's the creator of the souls. He's not even the creator of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, or the 24 elements. That's Krishna who does that. But he molds them together to make 8,400,000 species. Okay. All right, so then it says here, therefore, there's a difference between the two I's, namely the predominator and the predominated I. Therefore, there are still two I's, even accepting the argument of the impersonalist. But we must note carefully that these two I's are accepted in the Vedic literature, Catuh Upanishad, in the sense of quality. Not in every sense, just in quality. The Catuh Upanishad says, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kamam. The creator I and the created I are both accepted in the Vedas as qualitatively one, because both of them are Nityas and Chaitanas. Yeah, that's true. You, me, all living entities, we all have an eternal soul. And Krishna is eternal also. He's this supreme soul, the super soul, this eternal. So that means we are coexistent with Krishna as far as eternity is concerned. And Chaitanas means consciousness. We also have consciousness, right? But when we talk about Sat is eternity, so we're coexistent with him. Then Chit means knowledge. As far as knowledge goes, to have knowledge you need consciousness. So we have consciousness. But as far as knowledge goes, we're not coexistent, but we can participate in his knowledge. But his knowledge is always increasing. We are not able to conceive of it, that it's constantly increasing. And then when you come to bliss, we're only participating in it, but we cannot completely understand it because that's also increasing. So we're coexistent as far as eternity goes, and we have consciousness also. But when it comes to knowledge, sat, chit, knowledge, and then bliss, or sat, chit, ananda, those two things are always expanding. So we never really will be able to understand it completely. Right? Okay, that's why Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All right, so now he quotes this verse. The creator I and the created I are both accepted in the Vedas as qualitatively one because both of them are nityas and chaitanas. But the singular I is the creator, I, and the related I's are of plural number because there are many I's like Brahma, and those generated by Brahma. So Brahma has a lot of kids. And they get married, and they have a lot of kids, right? And this way, the material creation is starting. So Krishna is the original I that no one can be completely equal to or greater than. And then all the other I's are subordinate to him. Why? Because he is feeding them. He is supplying them nurture to live. And that doesn't include the human beings only. It includes all the living beings, 8,400,000 species, and it's infinite number of living entities, and he's feeding all of them. Now we come to the introductory verse of the Ishopanishad, which says that Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Adashite Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Visishyate. The Supreme Personality of God is perfect and complete. And because he is perfect and complete, everything that emanates from him is also perfect and complete. And because everything that emanates from him is perfect and complete, still he remains perfect and complete. Now you try and figure that out. Do you have any power like that? No. You work out, you sweat, and you get tired, and you got to drink a lot of water or something to replenish yourself and take some, what's that drink that they do for Gatorade? You got to get some Gatorade, to replenish your energy, right? But Krishna, he's expanding infinitely, and he's never diminished. No one can equal that quality. That's why he's the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead. And basically, he is feeding everyone. He's maintaining everyone. He's the source of everything. He contains everyone in his Virat Rupa form. And he existed before the material creation. He exists during the material creation. He exists after material creation, where everybody else disappears. And you're saying to me that Satya Sai Baba is God? Now, let's understand what it means to be God. If someone comes up to you and says, look, Prabhu, I'm actually God. The first thing you should say is, immediately pass stool right here. If it smells bad, I know you're not God. Because we know that Rishabhadev, right, his stool was fragrant, and he's an incarnation of God. So that's one way you can know if he's God or not. You say, immediately take your pants off, pass stool right here, and I will smell it. And if it smells bad, I know you're not God. You're a phony. Now, what's another litmus test? Show me your universal form. Oh, but you're not ready. No, Krishna didn't tell Arjuna you're not ready. Arjuna asked him, and right away Krishna showed him. So you show me your universal form. Oh, you're not surrendered to me. Yes, I am. I'm asking you, please, just like Arjuna asked Krishna. Now, he's not going to be able to do it. And another thing, lift up Govardhan Hill. And if you can't lift up Govardhan Hill, just lift up this table. They can't even lift the table. How are they going to lift Govardhan Hill? You see, it's very easy to prove that they're not God. But the Hindus are so dumb. They accept these crazy, ghoulish, nonsense people as God. They don't understand anything about God, see? It's just like in my language, they say, he who understands nothing will accept everything. Yeah, if you have no knowledge, you'll accept anything people say, because you have no knowledge. So now we know why the Hindus get fooled by the man gods in India. And there's many of them, right? In every generation, there's more and more of them nowadays. Even taxi drivers become God. Did you know who was a taxi driver? What was his name? I forget. I'll think about it in a minute. He became God. People worshipped him as God. It's complete nonsense, right? Okay, so now we go forward. It says, the Father creates or begets a Son, and the Son also creates many other sons, and all of them may be one as human beings, but at the same time, from the Father, the Son, and the grandsons are all different. So don't forget that there is oneness in quality, at least for one of the qualities, which is eternity. There is oneness, but it's in quality, not in quantity. We can never be equal to the Lord in quantity, but we can be equal in some aspects, such as we have an eternal soul. The Son cannot take the place of the Father, nor can the grandsons. Simultaneously, the Father, the Son, and the grandson are one and different also. As human beings, they are one, but as relativities, they are different. Okay, so now he gave it another way of expressing this. So let's talk about the word relativity. It's a very important concept, or relative. Relative means one thing depends on something else. It doesn't stand on its own. That's what a relative thing is. And relativity, is a little more explanation about that. Like when one king went to see Lord Brahma to get help to get his daughter married, he had to wait 15 minutes before he could meet Lord Brahma. Then he went in and Lord Brahma said, what is it? He said, well, I wanted you to help me get my daughter married. And Brahma started laughing. And he said, why are you laughing? He said, the 15 minutes you waited to see me, 300 generations your family has gone. That's relativity, you see. That is relativity. It's a little bit more meaning to it than just relative, right? So you have a relative, right? Someone who's connected you to you by something, right? But that's not the meaning of relative. Relative, why don't you look up the meanings of relative? You know, you'll see there's different meanings. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Radha Nilamadava ki jai. What's it say, relative? Besides, you know, a cousin or something like that. Microphone. And ladies, this is an equal opportunity microphone, so you can stretch all the way over where you are. So you don't have to get up and come over here. Yeah.
So the one which I found is the theory that was given by Albert Einstein.
So that's relativity.
Yeah.
No, relative. Something is relative.
Considered in relation or in proportion to something else.
Yeah, but it goes a little further. It's something that depends on something else. There's a relation, yes, but it doesn't stand on its own. being supported by something else. Just like we're all being supported by Krishna. So we are relative. Okay. So now it says, therefore the relativities of the creator and the created, or the predominator and the predominated, have been differentiated in the Vedas by saying that the predominator I is the feeder of the predominated I's, and thus there is a vast difference between the two principles of I. Again, it's a little confusing. It's the I. It's like the Mexicans. They have this song, I. But that's not the same I that they're talking about here. But you say the word I so many times, you get confused, right? Basically, what he just said is Krishna is feeding everybody else. In other words, everybody is being maintained by Krishna. Therefore, he is the predominator I, and everybody else is the predominated I. Okay? All right, so to get through what we just read, if you read it for the first time, you don't understand what it's talking about. Let's be honest, right? Even after hearing this explanation, you may or may not understand what it's talking about. But basically, what is he talking about? It's very simple. He's talking about what are the forms of the Lord, both in matter and in transcendence. This is what we're studying in this first nutshell verse. Now, the next part becomes a little much more understandable. It says, in another feature of this verse, no one can deny the personalities of both the Lord and Brahma. Therefore, in the ultimate issue, both the predominator and the predominated are persons. See, he's getting ready to throw another javelin at the Mayavadis, right? He's building up now to, really stab them right in the heart, right? So he says, therefore, in the ultimate issue, both the predominator and predominated are persons. This conclusion refutes the conclusion of the impersonalists that in the ultimate issue, everything is impersonal. You see how Prabhupada is, very, very methodical. And he is, aiming. But why? Because what is the meaning of Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarani. Read what that means. The second pranam mantra. Then you're going to understand why Prabhupada is so meticulous about the counterpoint of Vaishnava philosophy and Mayavad philosophy. Because Mayavad philosophy has ruined Hinduism, and I'm not going to say Hindu anymore. The real word is Bharat, Sanatan Dharma. What's it say? Read the translation of Namaste Saraswati Devi.
Our respectful obeisances are unto you, O spiritual master, servant of Saraswati Goswami. You are kindly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Deva and delivering the Western countries which are filled with impersonalism and voidism.
Yeah, in other words, filled with Mayavadis and Buddhists. They're both impersonalists, but there is a difference also between the Mayavadis and the Buddhists. We won't go into that now. So now you see, this is his pranam mantra. This defines who he is. And he has this mission of revealing the truth of the sophistry. Sophistry is a good word. You know what that means? Yeah. Look it up. Sophistry. Sophistry. The sophistry of the Mayavadis. What's it mean? Tricky dicky. Yeah, tricky dicky. They're saying the microphone so everyone can hear. Sophistry means
a subtle, tricky, so comma, subtle, comma, tricky, comma, superficially plausible.
wow, beautiful, superficial. It seems to be true, but it's not true.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the Mayavadi. He just gave the example of I. The Mayavadis say it's the same eye. There's only one eye. But actually, there's two eyes. There's Krishna and there's Brahma, and all the living entities are eyes, too. But they're subordinate, and Krishna is predominant. Go ahead.
But generally fallacious method of reasoning.
Fallacious means false.
False.
You see? That's exactly what the Mayavadis are. But yet, 90% plus of the gurus in India are Mayavadis. This is unbelievable. How did that happen?
It says one more line, the use of fallacious arguments,
Fallacious.
especially with the intention of deceiving.
Yes.
The second part is.
Especially with the intention of deceiving. This is how dangerous these people are. That's why they've ruined Sanatan Dharma. They're nasty. And they're the worst aparadis of Krishna, the worst. That's why Lord Chaitanya forbade his devotees to even hear the Mayavadis speak. Because he said, if you hear them, you risk never understanding Krishna consciousness. Never. Okay, so now, he says, this conclusion refutes the conclusion of the impersonalists that in the ultimate issue, everything is impersonal. This impersonal feature stressed by the less intelligent impersonalist school is refuted by pointing out that the predominator I is the absolute truth and that he is a person. The predominated I, Brahma, is also a person, but he is not the absolute. For realization of oneself in spiritual psychology, it may be convenient to assume oneself to be the same principle as the absolute truth, but there is always the difference of the predominated and the predominator, as clearly pointed out here in this verse, which is grossly misused by the impersonalists. Grossly misused, grossly misinterpreted, grossly sophistic. Right? So, okay. So now this mantra goes on for another 4 pages. Right? So we're not going to be able to cover it all tonight. But if you understand that this first mantra is all about understanding what are the forms of the Lord, both in matter and in transcendence. Meaning transcendence means in the spiritual world, and in matter it means in the material world. What are his forms? And there's a lot of them. There's a very big number of the forms that he assumes. There are 6 types of avatars. And each one of those types runs into the millions and billions. Right? There's Yuga avatar, there's Shaktavish avatar, there's Leela avatar, Purusha avatar, so forth, so forth. There's 6 different types, and each one, there's millions and billions of those avatars. And also, there's billions and trillions of Narayana forms in the spiritual world, and billions and trillions of Vishnu forms. And then you have the Chaturvyuhas. And so you see, there's a huge, unbelievable number of expansions of Krishna. but we have to understand them. So your homework for tomorrow, you start from Krishna to Balaram, to first Chaturvyuha, to Narayana, to second Chaturvyuha, to Vishnu, and then avatars. You have to write this out on a piece of paper so you understand the immense volume that we're talking about. And it's all coming from Krishna. It's all coming from Krishna, from one person. See? So you look it up. It's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You'll see it. It's in the Srimad Bhagavatam also. You should have to understand the expansions of the Lord in the spiritual world and the expansions of the Lord in the material world. That's what this mantra is going to explain. When you understand that, then you get a clear understanding of the greatness of Krishna. No one can be equal to him. No one can even come close to him. Right? We're all subordinate. That is the beginning of spiritual life, to realize that we can never be equal. And what are the Mayavadis saying? Like I said yesterday, they are the number one cancel culture people. They reject the existence of Goloka and Vaikuntha. They reject the existence of your soul. They say none of the jivas are actually real. They reject the existence of the material world, the whole material world. They say it's just an illusion. They reject the importance of bhakti yoga. They say it's a waste of time. Because there's only one reality, and that's the Brahman, and it's impersonal. Now look at all the things they reject. They rejected 99.9% of reality. And they bring you down to, this very, very limited position. And they say also that when Krishna appears in the material world, he has a material body. And he's subject to the laws of material nature, to the three modes of material nature. And he's also subject to dying like an ordinary person. This is all nonsense. But yet, people accept it. You see. It's incredible how this has happened. Therefore, Prabhupada's mission is to destroy it. See. The Buddhist theory and the Mayavad theory. That's who Prabhupada is. Right. Okay, so we'll stop there. Are there any questions? And we'll continue. I don't know if we can continue tomorrow, so it's Saturday. Yeah. Okay. What? Monday is a holiday? That's not a holiday, man. That's nonsense. What are you talking about? It's a fool day. Don't tell that to anyone; they'll get upset.
Next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay, fine. Oh, you have any questions?
Maharaj, you are asking about why are Mayavadis like kind of so predominant and all. Is one of the reasons
No,
also
I said the reason is because the Bharatiyas are so stupid. They're not, let's not say stupid, they're not educated.
Yeah, but is it also because I know there is this secular movement in India is also very predominant nowadays.
There's
where
what?
The secular movement.
Secular.
Secular, yeah, where they are trying to stay away from like saying that there is this one God who is like who does everything, and they want to kind of appease all the different religions also. Do you think that's one of the things why Mayavadi is like kind of catching up so much with the public and all, where they're accepting it's very convenient for us because I don't have to bow down.
Mayavadis have been there from the beginning of time. It's not something recent. They've been there since the beginning of time.
Okay.
So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was up against the Mayavadis also. Lord Chaitanya, it's huge. Oh, by the way, I didn't even touch this. Okay, I'll touch this next week. There's a whole other thing we have to talk about. Well, that'll be for next week. This is a big subject, you know. We're talking about the nutshell verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not an easy thing to talk about. It's very profound. Right? I don't even understand it all. I'm not saying I know it all, but I can maybe bring all the Prabhupada's explanations, and we can all learn together. But this is very profound principles. So okay, yeah, they're getting more prominent.
I was just saying, like, why Mayavadis are picking up and why not the Krishna philosophy or the Krishna consciousness is not getting there. It could be because of that, where people are...
Well, let me tell you something. Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote extensively on it. And I'm going to give you a taste of it next week and see how extensive and detailed it is. And exactly how did Sankaracharya fool people. And there's a full exposition of this in the first in Adi Leela, 7th chapter. You should read that. You know, it's an honor of something like this purport. You know, I. You know, it's very. I'm not saying it's confusing, but it's complicated. Yeah, because you're dealing with Sankaracharya. He's Sankaracharya, Lord Shiva. He's not a pushover. He's a brilliant person, and he was forced to do this. He was ordered to do it by Narayana to chase away the Buddhists and reestablish the Vedas. But he did it in a very tricky way, very, very tricky way. Only he could do it. Any other questions?
Yeah. Maharaj, so Krishna spoke these 4 nutshell verses.
Yes.
So the remaining 17,996, from where do they came?
Sukadeva Goswami.
Sukadeva Goswami.
He heard the 4 nutshell verses from his father, Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is an expansion of Narayana. And then Sukadeva Goswami expanded it. And Prabhupada said once, we can continue expanding. But don't dare do that. But he said, you know, you can add on to Srimad Bhagavatam.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, one question. When you started out in this movement, you know nothing about Indian Vedic philosophy or anything. Srila Prabhupada said Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead, and you followed it. But is it necessary for you to understand all other nonsense things like Mayavadi theories and everything? Because you've never been exposed.
Why did Krishnadas Kaviraj write all that?
But not correct. But you've never been exposed for your benefit. Why do you need to learn all these things?
No, if you want to be an effective preacher, you have to know this. If you want to sit on this chair, you have to know this. You're not allowed to sit on this chair unless you know the Sad-darshans. Right? That's right in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. You don't dare sit on this seat unless you know the Sad-darshans. Okay. So, but you can go back to Godhead without understanding all this stuff. That you can do. Just chant Hare Krishna, right? And take prasadam, dance, go in Sankirtan. You go back to Godhead. But if you want to be a preacher, an effective preacher, you have to know this. Because you're going to come into contact with all kinds of people. And just look in India, most of them are Mayavadis. Well, all over the world.
So partly, I think it's also related to the Isopanishad, where you should know Vidya and Avidya together.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes. So you have to understand Avidya along with Vidya so you don't get fooled.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Yeah.
So, I have not met any hardcore Mayavadi, but I heard a lot of people like talking about, they don't believe in the like Krishna or something, but they always talks about divinity and so is this same thing?
What?
Divine or something, divinity?
They don't believe in a divinity.
No, they believe. I mean, they talks about divinity or divine. They don't call it out like any god or something. So are those like Mayavadis or? So, yeah,
Well,
they'll say, oh, there is a divine power, there is divinity,
Yeah,
something like that. They
Mayavad.
don't call it like, oh, this is Krishna
Well,
or
it's
Shiva.
impersonal. It's impersonal. You
Impersonal,
understand?
yeah.
If you say, well, what does he look like? He says, no, he doesn't look like anything.
Yeah, okay.
He's just divine. It's all
Hindi
nonsense.
In Hindi we hear that Bhagwan mein leen ho jana. Like, you'll hear this. That is merging. So they speak in Hindi.
What is it? What did they say?
They say Bhagwan mein ya Paramatma mein leen ho jana. Means you merge. That's
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what they use. So, but people in general, they don't understand what
Well,
leen.
no, they understand that, your individuality it disappears and you merge into this oneness. They understand that.
Yogi
But
system.
none of them are going to get there.
Huh?
None of them are going to achieve that,
Yeah.
because they don't really understand anything about spiritual life. Why? Because they've canceled everything. They canceled Krishna, they canceled Vaikuntha, they canceled the material world, they canceled your soul, my soul. They canceled everything. So what are they going to understand? They have no knowledge at all. If you cancel everything, what do you end up with? You end up with someone stupid, that's ignorant, that doesn't know anything. And that's who they are. They're completely ignorant.
So a lot of Mayavadi also, like they follow Bhagavad Gita Maharaj, but Bhagavad Gita is always conversation. So how they basically,
They misinterpret
justify
it.
this
They
thing that there is no.
misinterpret it.
Sorry.
They misinterpret it.
Mhm.
Their Bhagavad Gita is not the same as Bhagavad Gita as it is.
But it is not like they also like Krishna, Bhagavan Uvacha or something like those
What?
things are there. I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, we have like Bhagavan Uvacha. When we say something in the verse, before some of the verses, like Krishna says, and there is a conversation between Krishna and Arjun. It's clear conversation. When two people are talking, so how come somebody, misinterpret? Even in misinterpret, they are conversation. I can understand about the misinterpretation of the actual verses, but if there is a conversation, they cannot deny the fact that two people are talking.
Prabhu, you don't know what you're talking about. If you want, I'll come next week and I'll speak like a Mayavadi. If you want, because you have not really studied Mayavadis and how they speak. And you'll see, it's complete nonsense.
The Mayavadis, they stay away from the subject of God, but they try to focus more on the humanity part, right? Be kind, be gentle.
Yeah, remember when I gave you the brochure of the Arya Samaj, and I read what they believe? Remember that day? I have it in my room. If you want to know what a Mayavadi is, you have to go to the Arya Samajis. Right? They're stone hardcore Mayavadis. Right? And they are open about it. They say, this is what we believe. And one of the main things is God does not have a form. So if I say, that Sukirti, he doesn't have a body. He doesn't have eyes, doesn't have ears, doesn't have a nose, doesn't have a mouth, doesn't have legs, doesn't have a neck, doesn't have a head. Is that glorifying you or insulting you? What do you think? That's what they're saying about God. He doesn't have a form. That means he doesn't have any of these things that you have. That means that you're better than him. See, that's why they're the worst aparadis. They're worse than the demons. They're worse than the demons. Okay, well, we'll stop right there. You see, this is what Prabhupada came to America and the West to do, to destroy the Mayavadis and the, Sunyavadis, because it's completely against devotional service. I'll give you an example. There was a man, he used to come long ago, before we had this temple. We had just a house. He used to come, he used to listen to the lectures, he used to take prasadam. He was very enthusiastic. Then he stopped coming for about 2-3 years. And then one day I saw him, and I said, Prabhu, how are you? He said, oh, I'm doing really good. I said, how come you don't come to the temple? Well, because your guru is not teaching correctly. I said, what? I said, you used to chant Hare Krishna. No, I found something much better. I said, really? What is it? He said, now I know that I can dance with the gopis. I said, what? You're going to dance with the gopis? And you're passing stool and urine still? How are you going to do that? He said, no, don't make fun of me. He said, I know what, and I don't need this deity worship. It's a waste of time. It's for sentimental people. We have much higher knowledge. I said, your higher knowledge is you're going to dance with the gopis? Is that your higher knowledge? Yes. It's completely nonsense, you see. And he went to this other group that have something going on in Bellevue. And he tried to convince me he has higher knowledge than Krishna consciousness. Right? And he's going to dance with the gopis. Does that sound right? No one is allowed to dance with the gopis. Only Krishna or Balaram. Balaram has his own gopis, and Krishna has his gopis. But, Dravida Gorilla tried to dance with the gopis, and immediately he was killed. Right? So, these people are crazy. They've gone nuts. Why? Because they're ignorant. Now, we're trying to not be ignorant by learning directly from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. But it takes time to learn this, because you run into transcendentalness, transcendental knowledge, and we're very, very, our what you would call space-time module is so limited that to try and open up our mind to the infinite ecstasies of Krishna consciousness is difficult. It takes time. It requires a lot of hearing and discussing and chanting and going on Sankirtan. Sankirtan is very important to understand this philosophy, because you go out there and you're challenged by all these people, all these Mayavadis and all these atheists and all these people, and you come back and you got to figure out, well, I gave an answer, but it wasn't really satisfying, neither to me nor to that person. So you have to ask questions, how come I wasn't able to answer this person properly? Yeah. So eventually you learn by going on Sankirtan. You learn the philosophy by going on Sankirtan, believe me, if you go regularly and if you actually preach to people. Right. All right, we'll stop right there. It's 9 o'clock, and in 7 hours we have to be up and ready. Hare Krishna.